Welcome to Flower of Life podcast. I'm your host, Carmen Fernandez, and in today's episode, we have Frank Armstrong. Frank was graduated with a degree in history. He also has a barrister at law degree, a master's in Islamic societies and cultures, and postgraduate diploma in education. Frank has written articles that have been published in the Irish Times and the London Magazine, among others. And currently he is the editor-in-chief of Cassandra Voices. Cassandra Voices is a magazine with the mission of providing independent voices that inspire new thinking. And today we're going to talk about his experience reporting during pandemic and other topics. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you, Carmen, for inviting me onto the podcast.
How are you this weekend?
I'm doing okay. Yeah, it's a reasonably mild day in Dublin. We had some heavy rain, but we haven't had the same cold that we experienced a week or two ago. So yeah. So I suppose we've just come out of the latest lockdown, and I think there's a reasonably optimistic mood in the city that we won't have to go into lockdown again, at least for a while, and we can have a more balanced life than we've had for some time.
And enjoy this Christmas.
Yeah, we can enjoy Christmas. It's very different. I mean, the traditional Dublin Christmas is pretty chaotic. Wild drinking, the 12 pubs of Christmas that people do. So parts of it I really don't miss, and I don't mind having a more quiet Christmas. But I will miss some of the constraints on meeting people, and also some of the maybe random encounters that you might find in a city, where you meet new people. I think, since March, it's been very difficult to meet anyone new. I think all our friendship circles have sort of narrowed down, and we haven't been able to make new acquaintances, which makes life a little less interesting.
Mm-hmm. And tell me about Cassandra Voices. Why did you decide to set up Cassandra Voices?
Good question. Well, first of all, I found some good collaborators who were able to help me, including an excellent photographer called Daniele Adini, and a person who is an expert in information technology, who has he's since moved on. I suppose I had been writing as a journalist for some time and struggling maybe to get stories through and get stuff published, because sometimes I was writing things that weren't so popular, and I wanted to have control of what I was writing. I wanted to write maybe longer articles, longer form articles. The standard opinion piece in a newspaper is about 800 words, and it's difficult to convey a lot in 800 words. So I wanted to be able to write longer form articles and to integrate other writers, maybe writers who weren't used to writing, and so I could help them. And so we've sort of built up a good following. We've published over 200 writers, a lot of them first-time writers. We've involved people, musicians, talking about their experiences. Musician of the Month column. We have featured artists, we have poets, we have fiction writers, but also hard news. So it's this idea of bringing all of these topics together, not just being a specialist publication. So it's been challenging. It's challenging to make a living in media at the moment, especially in the era of the internet and the cost of print. But we're slowly but surely emerging as a fully fledged publication.
Very good, well done. And I know that you have lived in different countries, and you have immersed yourself in different cultures and have friends, very international friends. How that has shaped your perspective and of life?
Um, well, at the age of 20, I went on Erasmus to Amsterdam. I had been away before that mostly with other Irish people. I did a summer in the United States and London, and previously in London. But when I went away to Amsterdam, I was forced to make, a whole new group of friends who weren't Irish, and it was really such an educational experience to meet and learn from people of other cultures, and to make lasting friendships with people who I, to this day, are some of my closest friends. And through them and their partners and other friends, I've managed to stay in and get to know other countries quite well, like Czech Republic. I've also lived in the UK for a number of years. I've spent some time in Spain. I spent time in Australia. I've traveled quite widely, and in a way it became a little bit of an addiction, and I had to kind of ground myself a little bit, and to live in Ireland and to appreciate Ireland, and I do. But I think maybe coming from an island, there's always this urge to look beyond our shores, to look out to sea wistfully at the waves and the wind, and where it could carry you. And so although I suppose I'm Irish, I have a cultural background that's Irish, I also appreciate and am intrigued by other cultures, and I don't really have an exclusive Irish identity. I feel like I'm, a citizen of the world. It's a bit of a cliche, but it informs who I am. I think that I've lived in other places, that I've met other people, that I've some grasp of other languages, although not as good a grasp as I would like. So I'll never just be Irish, and I don't want to be just Irish. And I don't think I like the idea of a country of people that don't feel just one identity, because I think in the world we're in now, it's really dangerous. It's becoming everybody is very fixed or increasingly fixed in their identities. And we're seeing a lot of conflict emerging out of that, not just in terms of nationalism, but in terms of, whether you're in favor of wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, or whether you're in favor of trans rights or not trans rights. It's this identity politics that is quite dangerous, and we're not talking to one another enough. We're not listening to one another enough, and we're becoming too fixed in our views. So I suppose that's what I think travel and living in other countries has done for me. It's broadened my horizons.
So you see yourself in other people's shoes, kind of, right?
Yeah, I that's a good way of putting it. I think empathy is an important part of that. You can only go so far. You only have a limited ability to see from another person's perspective. But I think if you can develop that, it's really a great learning for journalism. To be able to empathize with the struggle of a refugee, to empathize with the struggle of a doctor, to empathize with the struggle of a young person struggling under COVID-19 restraints, to empathize, to try and empathize widely, and not only empathize with one person in the mix.
Mm-hmm. And has that had an impact on the articles that you write or the topics that you write about?
Definitely. I think probably I've tended to maybe write on subjects that are not what the mainstream are looking at. And that's maybe what the idea of Cassette, also an idea behind Cassandra Voices. So I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the story of Cassandra, who was a prophetess from ancient Troy. And she was unfortunately cursed because she would tell the truth to people, but she wouldn't be believed. So it's sort of the idea that you're writing, or that we're sometimes writing the truth, but we're not being believed. Maybe that's a little bit arrogant, but it's sort of the premise behind the magazine anyway.
That's so beautiful. And I think it's so relevant now, right? With all this COVID. It's like the COVID is the only thing that is happening, and
Yeah, I think
kind of. Can you talk about your experience of reporting COVID and any challenges that you've gone through?
Yeah, well, like everybody else in March, I was probably in a bit of shock when the pandemic started. I suppose I was worried for my father in particular, who's in his mid-70s and who I live with. And so that was, I also live with my sister and her children and husband. And so we were afraid that our father would be infected because it seemed like he was everywhere. And the Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, said that perhaps 85,000 people would die in Ireland. So there was a bit of panic, and we were, we moved my father out of the house, or he didn't. We all decided that it would be better if he could move into an apartment nearby, and so all these stresses were on our mind. But then I started digging into the subject, and I began to find out that really maybe this wasn't quite as catastrophic as we were being told. And I started to be a bit suspicious of the coverage in the national media. And I also instinctively was very opposed to lockdown. To me, that was coming from a legal background. I suppose I was very conscious of the human rights that were being taken away. And so I was quite uncomfortable with all that. And I began, and maybe that motivated me to research a bit further. And I probably then, was drawn to research suggesting that what we were seeing was an exaggeration of a real problem, of a real pandemic. And so I probably got involved in some disputes and some arguments, and it was quite distressing for me, and it has been quite distressing for me, because I was in dispute and arguments with friends who took a different view and were keen to, for the controls to be in place, and for a more stringent strategy to be employed by governments. But so that was quite distressing, because I suppose I've come from a more left-wing perspective, but it seemed like many people on the left were in favor of a lot more controls, and people on the right were against the controls. And that seemed quite strange to me, because Um, I felt, that there were very important civil human rights at stake, and that the left should be protecting those. And also, I felt it was quite unhealthy, was having quite a negative impact on people's health in terms of mental health, but also my sister was having to look after her children. They didn't have the creches were all closed, the schools were all closed, so it was a real struggle I saw for children in that period of the lockdown. And also being single it wasn't easy. It was very difficult to meet anyone. And also, I suppose I felt, knowing a lot of musicians, I felt that they were being affected and ignored, and the whole live music industry was disappearing, and I was worried, I was looking at the huge cultural loss, the huge social loss, and indeed the health cost of people being stuck at home. And also, I suppose, the whole the fact that everybody is mediating their lives through their computers, through their phones. To me, that's a regrettable trend. We're losing a connection to people around us, to nature, to real things, because of our attraction, because of the attraction of the digital. And it's funny, I wrote an article in 2019 called "The Doomsday Machines," which sort of in a way maybe anticipated this trend of people's lives being taken over by the phone, which becomes sort of the kind of the thing that maybe is the single thing that's probably having the worst effect on humanity at the moment. You look around, I look at myself, walking down the street, looking at WhatsApps, Instagram, Twitter, all these things, instead of surveying the birds, the people, the trees, all the real things around us.
And how was your experience reporting?
Well, I suppose it's not my role wasn't really a traditional reporter role. I wasn't going into hospitals or interviewing people directly. It was more, I wrote a few articles where I was looking up a lot the science of the issue, scientific questions, trying to understand some of the questions that were being debated in the media, and trying to respond with articles of my own. But I was also editing a lot of people's articles, including during the first lockdown. We were sent a lot of contributions by people from all over the world on what is happening, what was happening around them in Italy, in China, in Spain, and elsewhere. What would the world how the world had become in that very interesting period of history. Whatever we want to say about it, it was certainly interesting what happened. The kind of wartime that none of us had ever experienced. And now, we see in Europe, we have this martial law applying where people, a curfew, where people have to return to their homes at 10 o'clock. That hasn't been seen in Europe since wartime. It's unprecedented. and it doesn't seem to be scientific. It seems to be, well, I mean, maybe there are scientific arguments for it, but I don't think the virus is only working at night. So it seems like an extension of the power of the state that we just haven't seen in our lifetime, and we just have to hope that when the challenge, especially to our hospital infrastructure, when that ceases to be so difficult, that we lift those controls. But unfortunately, history shows that when emergency legislation is brought in, that governments tend to maintain it. So we will have to consider the implications for our freedom in the long term, as well as implications, for safety.
And you have written a book, Potatoes, Beef and Potatoes.
Well, no, it's just that was a chapter in a book.
Okay. So I want to tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah, that's so. When I was living in Oxford in the UK, I decided that I wanted to write a history of Irish food. I never got around to writing the full history, but I wrote a lot of different articles on not just Irish food history, but on the history of food around Europe and the world. And I was drawn in particular to questions around sustainability in Ireland, and why is it that the agriculture in Ireland is so limited? Why is it that we have just cattle in fields? We don't have a very broad range of foods available in Ireland. So I was investigating the sort of colonial origins of Irish agriculture, especially in the wake of the great potato famine, the Great Irish Famine from 1845 to 1849, where almost 1 million people died and 1 million people emigrated. And it's when the Irish famine broke out, there were perhaps 8.5 million people living in Ireland, and today on the whole island of Ireland there are only about 6 million. So I think Ireland is the only country in the world that actually has a lower population now than the 1840s. So we've really that Ireland has in a way never recovered, and the population was actually declining until the 1950s. The Irish population continued to decline because particularly because there were no jobs in rural Ireland, because the way to be profitable when you are raising cattle in a field is you don't employ people. You don't, your sons go off and daughters go off and emigrate. So unlike if you're growing things where you need a lot of workers, so that when you have tillage farming, when you're growing fruit trees and corn and barley and all these things, you need to have lots of workers. But because Irish agriculture was all about cattle, we just didn't. There were no jobs in Irish agriculture, and because we didn't have the Industrial Revolution like in the UK, there were no jobs in the cities either. So people left for the UK, left the United States, left for Australia and elsewhere, and the population continued to decline. So this is a kind of in a way, it's a golden era in Irish history since the 1990s, when Ireland began to attract lots of foreigners to the country for the first time. Crazy people who decided to live in Ireland. Why would you come to this wet, cold country when you have nice, warm country? And we also have, I suppose, interestingly, the youngest population in Europe now. So it's quite a vibrant country, but we also we're not very good at changing the way we live. You know, we're still very car reliant. We're still the agricultural system hasn't changed. You know, we're quite conservative in many ways in education, in healthcare. We have a two-tier health system where wealthy people purchase insurance and poor people rely on public medicine, and so which is inferior, and so we've got too many inequalities in the country. So there are big challenges, even though it is a golden era.
Mm-hmm. And what is the impact you want to make in the world?
Well, I don't expect I'll have too much of an impact in the world. I'm not like a great dictator who's going to change the course of history.
Well, but you're with your magazine, with Cassandra Voices, you're making an impact on every reader, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. I don't think you can really predict what impact you have on the world. You can only be as you can be as self-disciplined as possible. You can be as authentic as possible. You can try and calm your ego, control your ego, and do only what you're capable of. I don't know. Journalist, I brought maybe some subjects to prominence, but I don't think I don't know if I'll be I don't know if anyone will remember me after I die, and maybe and that's fine.
But it's I don't think making an impact, you need to be making an impact on everybody in the world. Like, you're already making an impact with your presence, with in your family, with your friends.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yes.
So I suppose you want to, I mean, I suppose for a long time I also put on events, and I put on musical events, cultural events. And for me, I'd love to continue to make that contribution when the restrictions are lifted after COVID. I would love to organize more events, bring people together. I'm a social person, and that's probably one of the reasons why lockdown has been so challenging for me, because I do really enjoy meeting a variety of people, and obviously we haven't been able to do that. So I'd love to be able to organize more concerts and more talks, more literary presentations, where we are this year we're publishing a book in collaboration with a man called Ronan Sheehan, called Cuban Love Songs, which is a collection of Cuban poems translated from Spanish by a number of Irish authors and poets and reinterpreted. So we would love to put on an event to have readings of these poems in Spanish and in English, maybe with music, maybe with cigars, rum, who knows. So yeah, so all these
salsa dancing.
Exactly. So I love the idea of sort of bringing people together, festivity, and yeah, and that can be a contribution on a very local scale. I don't want to start another electric picnic or anything like that. I find those kind of festivals actually really unpleasant. I like more intimate gatherings where people can meet. Although it's not. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes actually at the events I organize myself, I'm actually quite withdrawn. I'm quite shy, because I find it difficult actually when I'm organizing something to actually talk to people. So it's funny. both very open, but also quite shy sometimes as well. I suppose that's like a lot of people.
Yeah. And it's I miss the socializing as well. Like I think we all miss socializing more and meeting new people, especially, when we are like, when we like to meet international people from different countries, from different cultures, and we like to mix with different personalities. It's challenging these times where you cannot have the freedom to go out and meet people and socialize. So I understand that your challenge, because I have that challenge as well. That's challenge for me as well.
And it would have been, I think it's a real lost opportunity that we didn't organize more spaces for people to meet outside, for example, and for more events to happen outside. Because even though the climate here is tough, sometimes it rains and it's cold, but a lot of the time it's quite mild, so people can actually stand outside and where you don't have these super spreader events that they're trying to prevent, and even let's say in the summer, I was really disappointing that there weren't more outdoor events, more concerts, more things that, make a, even though, we don't want our hospitals to be overwhelmed, but at the same time, we want people to be happy. And, depression is a real plague now in society. We've seen the statistics about the number of people who are affected by depression now because of the COVID-19, because of the restrictions. And I think the sole focus on keeping the numbers of COVID-19 has been to the exclusion of making sure the population are the well-being of the population is taken care of.
How can people find you or connect with you?
Professionally?
Yeah, so
well, if you go
or
on
personally,
if you go on the website CassandраVoices.com, I'll show you our book, CassandраVoices.com.
Ah, yes, thank you.
And so if you go on that website, we have a contact page. If we're always looking for new contributors from different perspectives to inspire new thinking. Where I'm also on Twitter, Frank Armstrong 2. I'm on Instagram and all the other platforms, which I have a love-hate relationship with.
And what type of articles do people can find on Cassandra Voices?
Oh, a whole variety of articles. Just to give you a flavor, today I published an article by a musician about his new release, another article of poetry. Then the previous day we published an article on the effect of advertising called which about algorithms and how we're all being conditioned to think in a certain way, which is a very interesting article. I published an article last week myself on prisons, on the Irish prison system, and how how too many prisoners are reoffending when they get out. And I think that's a subject that I want to pursue next year, and to see what can be done and what is the best model internationally to use for how do you prevent people from reoffending when they come out of prison, through education, through treatment, drug people getting off drugs, through social services, through psychological interventions, through entrepreneurship courses, through loads of different things, open prisons, ways for people to reintegrate into society. And so that's a theme that I want to follow up next year. Yeah, and then we cover the arts, we cover science, the environment. You know, we've done a lot of stuff on the refugee crisis. Mm-hmm. One of our contributors this year, he went out to Camp Moria on Lesbos in Greece, mm-hmm. Which is a terrifying refugee camp, and this our edition has a photo essay on that experience. This is available to purchase online, I should add. Mm-hmm. There are a few copies left. So we're trying to cover a wide variety of subjects, not to get caught up with covering COVID too much.
Yes.
You know, especially next year, I'm really trying to move on from that subject. I covered it myself quite a bit. We've had other contributors. I'd really like to bring focus to other health issues, like the obesity pandemic. Mm-hmm. You know, so there are a lot of pollution, for example, is another mm-hmm. issue we need to look more at. So all these things that are feeding into the COVID debate that mm-hmm. that aren't emphasized enough, we'd probably like to look at them in more detail.
Thank you, Frank. Is there anything else you want to?
No, just to thank you for inviting me, and to wish you and all your listeners a happy Christmas.
Thank you, Frank. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Okay.
And thank you for sharing with us your experience as an editor and new topics. It's good to feed our mind with different topics. And for you guys, thank you very much for listening. And I'll put in the description of the episode the links to connect with Frank and Cassandra Voices. So go and check Cassandra Voices website and feed your mind with different topics and inspire yourself to think independently. And if you want to see more episodes of Flower of Life podcast, check our website, floweroflifepodcast.com.